All right, guys, what's going on? Nick Kuzbas here. We are talking jerkbaits. This is the third installment, and this is it. This is going to get you guys going this year. We already talked about setup. We talked about color. Now we're going to talk about jerkbaits. Why I use them, where I use them, when I use them, and all that stuff. So let's not waste any time. Let's roll. What makes a jerkbait good? Why do fish eat jerkbaits? Well, there's a couple of reasons. It really mimics an injured or spooked bait fish to a T. Triggers something in the fish that they just cannot stand. You know what I mean? And they eat it. And they eat it when they're aggressive. They eat it when they're off. It's the one moving bait that you can get bass to eat regardless of their mood. So this is the typical Megabass 110 jerkbait. This one is the silent one, but it generally has the weight transfer system, goes to the back of the tail, so when you're making casts, that bait doesn't spin. Allows you to make long casts, which is key, especially up here in the North Country where we're fishing a lot of clear water. You want a bait that gets out there. If you can't cast it far enough, it's going to be hard to get fish. You're going to get a lot of fish that'll follow the bait, but they're not going to eat it. This bait allows you to make really long casts. And then, of course, when you get it out there, hits the water, you give it a little twitch, that nose dives down, the ball falls to the head, and then you start your action. And then your action, again, will depend, like I talked to you, cold water, you're slowing it down. In the summertime, you speed it up. Your pauses, again, longer pauses in the spring, much faster in the summertime. But this bait is going to catch them in clear water. It's a sight bait, so it's used where fish can see. So clear water, stained water, it's not that you're not going to catch any fish in murky water, but they're just better options. This is definitely a clear water stain. It's a visual bait. Fish see it, they come and eat it. Both smallmouth and largemouth, doesn't matter. But particularly up here in the North Country when we're fishing smallmouth, it's not just a bait that catches fish, it catches big fish. Some of the biggest smallmouth I've caught have come on these 110s or the plus ones. Dynamite bait. Definitely big fish and numbers as well. This 110 is kind of the staple. It's what made Megabass as popular as they are today in North America. They started with these 110s and everybody was buying them for good reason. They work, they catch fish. It's a 4 to 5 foot bait, not really any deeper. In the spring, I want to fish it slower and I want to get it down to those fish. So I may choose flats that are more like 5-6 feet. Get it down really low to where those fish are. Those cold days, they don't want to come up for a bait. So even if you're a foot or two higher than them, generally it'll lead to follow-ups and stuff like that. So in shallow water, this is my go-to. And again, long pauses in the spring. Now in the summertime, when metabolism rate starts speeding up, then I can get it into some deeper water, 8 to 10 feet. And still some of those fish, when they're really aggressive, they're looking up, they'll come up and eat it. But this is my shallow water jerkbait. It's my go-to every day. Anytime I'm fishing shallow water, I got this 110 rigged up. Plus one really is my favorite jerkbait that they make. I fell in love with this a long time ago. This is one of our custom Canadian colors. Northern Effect, I believe this is called. Wicked color. And it dives a little bit deeper. You could see that lip is a little bit longer on this one. So it gets down 7 to 8 feet. I love this bait on deeper flats, down to 10 feet. The edges, you're fishing a ledge where those fish might be cruising in that, 5 to 9 foot range. This bait gets down there. But the magic part of this bait is its action. Very different than a 110. Actually very different than anything you'll see on the market. It has a really beautiful side-to-side sweep. Something about that action that really triggers the fish. It works the same way whether you're fishing it fast or slow. I love this thing in the summertime. I fish it as well in the spring. And again, I'm getting into deeper water where those fish may not want to come up for that 110. This plus one really gets them. The setup is pretty much the same, but it's all about, there is no one cadence that works. And I've said this before. Cadence that you're catching fish on is the best cadence, but that cadence can change day to day, can change hour to hour. It depends on their activity. Sometimes you got to speed it up. Sometimes you got to be slow. But I can tell you one thing about cadence. Don't get caught on one. We used to have this joke where we would have a song in our head and we would actually work the bait to the song, you know, you know, just a fun thing. But, you know, a lot of times it worked, and we would ask, you know, when our buddies would go out, we'd say, hey, what song were you catching those fish on? Nobody knew what we were talking about, but it was all about the cadence. So +1, you know, awesome bait. If you don't have any, this is one of the most underutilized baits that Megabass has. Check it out. Trust me. Give it, understand, every time you get a new jerkbait, put it in the water and just give it a couple twitches to rod just to see the action. It'll give you a good idea of what you got to do when you make a long cast. +1, deadly. We're going to go to the +2 now. This is brand new, came out last year. You know, a little bit deeper again. And not only is the lip longer, but you can actually see it's longer than the +1. I'll bring the +1 back because I think it's important for you to see that, but you could see the difference, right? So much bigger lip and actually much wider lip too. It pushes more water. This bait is like a everyday use, 12-foot, no problem. But on a really long cast, that rod tip down is going to push that bait deeper. You can scratch 16 feet. So again, deeper flats when those fish, fresh fish come out of deep water on those, you know, deeper flats, 20 to 15 feet. This bait is money. The other thing that makes this so good in that deeper water is that, think about it, there are very few guys fishing a jerkbait that deep. So if you're fishing an area that other boats have come in, they're probably throwing a drop shot, a Ned rig, a tube, maybe a swim bait, something down on the bottom. Now you're throwing them something that they did not see throughout the day in that area. So I'll go in behind boats and throw this +2 and get a couple extra bites. I love this thing in the spring, cold water. I'll use it again in the summertime, but again, you know, cold front conditions, the fish are backed off those shallow flats. They're just very lethargic and not really interested. A lot of times this bait, getting it down there in that deeper water and just like a steady sweep. The rod setup on this is a little bit different. I almost like a crankbait style rod. So something with a little more glass, got a little more flex in that belly. It kind of eats that action a little bit because that lip has got a lot of width to it. And, you know, a stiffer rod is going to kind of overwork it, where that slower graphite almost just lets it play a bit more, right? Bows back to the bait and gives it more room to kind of move around. I really love that bait. That kind of setup. You know, 10-pound test, fluorocarbon, maybe 12 in areas that have some bigger rock and wood, but that's another great bait. All right. Before I leave the 110s, I want to quickly talk. I had it in my hand. I want to talk about the silent, which a lot of guys don't look at. And because Megabass makes so many baits, you know, guys don't, you know, they're not going to buy all of them. They think, it's the same. I'll just get this. But the silent, what it has, it doesn't have the weight transfer system. It's a fixed weight. And there's no beads in there. So you could see, here I'm shaking it. Other than the hook, if I close, it's very quiet. So this thing slides through the water really naturally and quietly, just like a bait fish. It's going to make a little bit of noise. The hooks are going to bang, but you're not going to get that rattling. My wife and I did a video years ago where she went underwater and I was working jerkbaits back to the boat. And the first thing I noticed when I got back home is how much noise that jerkbait made. And I was thinking, on calm days, really flat days, maybe that noise might be a deterrent. It might spook fish. So this thing slithering through the water, I find on really flat, calm days. I love this bait. I love this bait again in the spring when they're off and they're just not really in the mood to chase. This thing coming through the water very naturally gets me a few extra bites. Again, this is definitely one of the baits that nobody talks about. So either guys everywhere are catching fish on it and they're trying to keep it a secret, or they're not using it. It does not cast the same way because it doesn't have the weight transfer system. But honestly, on days where it's calm, you're not really worried about wind, this bait will cast very well. It's heavy enough. It gets out there, not an issue. On cloudy, windy days or windy, sunny days, there are other baits I'd go to anyways, so it's not too much of an issue. This really has a beautiful, lifelike swim. Definitely something that you should put in. Definitely something you should put in your tackle box. It's a fantastic bait and underutilized. Then we have the Juniors. Junior is another bait that I've been using for a very long time. It's been around for a while. It's the same as the 110. Same profile, it's just smaller. So you can see when I put them together how much smaller that Junior is. I like using this in the spring again, you know, when the fish are just coming up on those shallow flats. It doesn't dive as deep as a 110. It's like a 3 foot basically. But it because of its small profile and matching the hatch in that really clear lakes in your area, whatever the clearest lakes are, I just find the smaller profile gets bit more. But it's on those specific days where the fish are really spooky, it's calm, the water's super cold, and those fish are coming up, and all the bait fish are smaller. This small profile is really going to get them. This bait, actually, a little funny story. When I first started with Megabass, we were at a Bassmasters Classic, and the product manager asked me if there was a bait that we didn't have, what would it be? And I'm like, you should make a +1 and a junior, and we talked about the whys and all that stuff. Anyways, like any company busy making all these new products like Megabass does every single year, he called me up about a year ago and he said, remember that conversation we have? Let's talk about it again. Here we are a year later and we have a junior +1. Early season, cold water conditions, gets down a little bit deeper now. So gets into that 7-foot range where that +1, or I'm sorry, where the junior won't go, or you have to go to a +1, which is a bigger profile. So the smaller profile matches the bait fish better. So again, super clear lakes. I could see this junior being a killer. It's a slower, more methodical, longer pauses. Guys, I'm busting about this bait. Very, very pumped. Can't wait to get it out this spring. That's definitely another bait. Springtime, a little bit deeper, junior +1 is the deal. And again, like all Megabass, the one thing about them, before I get into anything else, so many colors. And I'm a huge color guy, especially with smallmouth. There are certain situations where you got to have some options. They will follow, and they are smart, and they're just not feeding. If you have the right combination, you can always get fish to bite. We've been in situations where it's flat calm. There's no reason they'd eat a jerkbait, but we still get them to eat a jerkbait. Because we have options and color options, makes a big difference. So check out that junior +1. It's going to be a deadly bait, no doubt about it. Edo Shiner is another one. A little bit different. I kind of consider the Edo Shiner. I don't have one in my hand right now, but it's more of a rip bait. You find them in any tackle stores. Pro J's has them online as well. But they're a bigger bait. They're a 3/4 ounce bait. I love that bait when when I need to cover water fast. It's more of an aggressive jerk bait, so I can cover water. I can reel it in a bit faster, kind of move it a bit more. It really has those hard darts. Again, covering water, pre-fishing, looking for fish on big flats, trying to find a school. I can get that trolling motor going a little bit quicker. Again, 10 to 12 pound test, fluorocarbon straight. Some guys like braid in the summertime. Braid's really good. You don't have to work the bait as hard to get the action out of it, but you got to remember too, these baits, these Megabass baits are tuned so well. You really don't need to hit it very hard. And I find that braid, as much as you might get a couple extra bites, you'll lose some fish because the leverage between no stretching the line and stuff like that, I'm just not a fan of it. Again, in my setup, I talked about how much I like using braid and spinning. It's different. They're softer rods. I'm using a fluorocarbon leader, bigger guides. You don't have to worry about the knot that you're using, grabbing one of those guides and snapping your line. So I just go straight fluorocarbon. I love it. If I'm fishing real shallow water, I'll go to mono. Is another option if I want to keep that bait up on shallow flats. But again, the Edo Shiner is great for that. I love using it in pre-fish. I love using it when I'm covering water. The X80 is another one that I like, and again, I'm more in tune with the 110s, their whole family. Between the 110s and the juniors, I really love. I use a lot of those. And then, the Edo Shiner. The X80, I do like it in certain situations. Something smaller, really clear water. I'm trying to downsize, but I still like that a little bit of erratic action. That X80 is fantastic. But, again, it just depends. They're all really good. I've caught lots of fish on all of them. Some guys, I talked to some Megabass guys, they're huge fans of that X80, and they get really, they got a lot of confidence in it. Obviously, I've played around with them. They got great action. It's just, I really get into, we're already talking about a lot of baits and trying to fit them into your arsenal and figure out when to use what. There's just a limit I have, where I'm just like, okay, I know this is going to catch fish, but, I have it there. And if I really need it and I feel like I'm just missing something, then I'll go to it. But for me, the 110s kind of cover everything I need. They cover the depth. They cover the action. All the colors are in there, man. The 110s, there's 100 colors out there. Hooks, let's talk quickly about them. I don't put a lot of stock into changing hooks. My jerkbait hooks that Megabass has, They are fantastic. If you have the right setup and your setup's not too stiff, you don't need those. Out barbs are sticky. You're going to lose fish. And believe me, I played around with hooks back in the days. It didn't matter which hook I had. I still lost fish. There wasn't one that seemed to be better. To me, if you have the right action, the right color, they eat it better. They generally come to the boat. When you lose them is when they're really lethargic and they swipe at it and they get that back hook and they're not really eating it. When they're eating it, you get them to the boat. So when I'm getting bit and I'm seeing they're catching that back hook, I figure I'm doing something wrong. I don't have the right color. I don't have the right cadence. So I'm always making those changes throughout the day to try and really dial in on that pattern. It's going to get me better bites and I'm going to get more of those fish to the boat. Listen, play around with these things, really get them dialed in, match the bait to the depth of the area you're fishing or the depth that the fish are in, and it's going to help you. It's going to get you more fish. Be open about it. Play around with some different models that we have. Check out that silent one, man. I promise you on those flat, calm days, they will get you bites, especially fish that are spooky. Guys, that's it. I really appreciate all your feedback on the jerkbait stuff. If you have any questions, if there's a bait that isn't a Megabass that you have some questions on, I've used a bunch of them, so I know I have some good knowledge on a lot of them. It's just too much time to cover them all. I'm a Megabass guy, so I stuck with my brand. But honestly, if you have something else, please send me a message. I'd be happy to walk you through and help you out. I'm just trying to think if I missed anything. I don't think I did. I'm trying to be fast here because it's a lot of... I don't want to keep you guys here for half an hour. We've already been here. I feel like we're family, man. We've been talking about jerkbait so long, and I just think this is a good conclusion. Thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you guys on the water soon. Take it easy.